Welcome back to Beneath the Grandstand, episode 21. Alex, we are of legal drinking age.
We made it. We made it. What do you usually buy people when they turn 21? Something terrible, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, Irish car bomb or something. Just
That's when I had my first
Coleslaw and stuff like that.
Jägermeister shot, and I was like, what
That
is
sounds about
this?
right.
Yeah. So, but we're here. We're surviving and doing it. And, you know, it's an exciting episode for us. There's a lot of sports happening right now. There's playoffs. You know, the Lakers and the Heat. Heat beat the Celtics. I'm a New England guy, so that was a little sad. But, you know, Alex and I were on the phone the other day, and he was really distracted by the Twins blowing a game in the end. So I don't know. Have you recovered from that? How'd they do today?
No, Ryan, I have not recovered, and they lost again today, which makes it 18 straight postseason losses. But yeah, let's have a great pod.
No, and the fact that you're really on that stat is sad. That's a stat I would not want to be on top of.
Well, it's the best. It's the best of all those stats. Don't get me wrong. We're the best at that streak.
There was, so, you know, my alma mater is Clemson. We went through a point where we were like 0-52 against North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It was like the worst losing streak in college basketball. That got broken a few years ago. So I sympathize with you a little bit on having the best of a real shitty record. So hey, you know, at the time of this recording, we're 2 games in, right? So there's still hope.
No, unfortunately, the wild card series is just a 3-game series, so it's literally over. It's literally over, Ryan. But thanks for trying to pad my.
Shows you how much I've been following the Major League Baseball. So I think that's a good time for us to transition and talk about things that maybe you'll be more happy about. You know, and we look at track and field and give a shout out on the flow track side here. We actually have some competitions that have been happening and have continued to happen over the last couple of days. The Continental Tour in Nairobi, Kenya took place on October 3rd. Live in Lieu, if you don't know what that is, it's a college cross country event broadcasted on Flow Track, Tom Sawyer Park in Louisville on October 3rd. So fall is here. College cross country is happening, and we are there. And if you're listening to this pod and you're listening on the day that it's launched, hopefully you got up and you watched the London Marathon, Kipchoge versus Bekele at the time of this recording. Results yet to be known, but super excited about that. And for those in Canada, Australia, a number of countries in Europe, you can watch the replay on Flow Track. And hey, October 7th, just a couple days away, the NN Valencia World Record Day with Joshua Cheptegei going after that 10K world record. Team NN with Kipchoge and Bekele and Cheptegei. They've actually done a pretty good job of I think what's the King's Throne that they're calling all of these races that are coming up this week. So it's been pretty cool to see them helping get fans excited about some competition out there.
Yeah, super refreshing. And I think it's a breath of fresh air to, you know, see some things on the schedule. And I think it plays perfectly into our conversation today. It's like, oh yeah, cross country is happening right now. Like a college cross country season is actually happening for us. And I think you guys are going to really appreciate the conversation we dive into today. Someone who has a pulse on the sport, who's knee deep in a cross country season right now, and has some strong opinions about what the cross-country season is going to look like or could potentially look like through the rest of the year and into 2021.
Yeah, because this conversation comes on the backdrop of the recent decision by the NCAA to have the cross-country championships on March 15th, a Monday in Stillwater, Oklahoma, just 2 days after the indoor championships in Fayetteville, Arkansas. So just a couple hours from one another. So today's conversation is a great one with someone who we believe to have some of the best experience out there. He's a 38-time SEC champion. His teams are, we should say, He's coached teams to 5 NCAA titles, 8-time National Coach of the Year, and also regarded as not only the most successful coach in the University of Arkansas, but also the most successful coach at in the SEC when it comes to women's cross country and track and field in the history of the conference. We're talking about Lance Harter. He's in his 31st year at University of Arkansas. He's coming off of a Triple Crown year in 2019, the first for the Lady Razorbacks, where they won the indoor season, the outdoor season, and cross country. So this means, Alex, he is the defending champ, given that there were no championships in 2020 for track. He's the defending champ. His teams are in all 3 seasons, and really excited to talk to him today. We were coming into this.
Yeah, valid. I mean, the Triple Crown is unbelievable, and you cannot deny that Arkansas is a force in both in cross country and in indoor. And so that's why, we reached out to Lance, and we thought that he could give a proper perspective on the challenges that hosting a national championship indoors on their own campus and right next door a couple days later a cross country championship is going to face, because they're not one of these schools that's heavy one way or the other. They are truly vested in every season, and so I think his opinion matters here.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that we have a lot of questions, and it really our questions help me find that there's still a lot of questions out there for everybody, including coaches, including someone like Lance Harter, who is one of the more highly regarded coaches probably in NCAA Division I. And so a lot to dig into through our conversation that I think will really open your eyes to some of the things that are going on and some of the things that have not actually been confirmed and decided yet. So that said, we'd like to introduce this conversation with Coach Lance Harter. Coach Harter, welcome to the show. It looks like you're joining us from a highly decorated office there, I'm assuming in Fayetteville. Where are you at, and what's behind you there?
This is home. This is the office at the university overlooking our outdoor track and our new building that we're building, a high performance center that is going to enclose our stadium. And so I have the luxury of having a patio and a nice big office, and we can look out and see the construction, which will finish in March.
The awards back there, it makes me think of, last cross country season, the championship that your women's team won. I think the first cross country title, but it was the Triple Crown across the indoor and outdoor and cross country seasons. What is it like to experience such a high and really make your mark in history at Arkansas and within the NCAA, to then go to the next season where we actually haven't competed since?
Yeah, I guess we're the defending champions still at cross country, indoor and outdoor. But, we did, like you said, we had a great high winning at Terre Haute. Terre Haute has never been nice to me in the past, but everything came together. And, obviously we had a very, very special group of seniors and a couple of underclassmen to help put that together. And the result was being able to be on the top of the podium. We've been second and third and fourth in the past, so it's nice to complement it with the gold trophy. And then we took all that momentum and we were super excited about our track outlook for indoors. We win the SEC title, and then we're on our way to Albuquerque. Everything was in a positive fashion. The kids were super excited, and we felt we had a really, really good team. And then the morning of registration, checking in the day before the actual meet itself, TV's there. We're going through all the different steps that we do when we go to a national meet. And as we're checking in, Joe Franklin from New Mexico came over and he said, "Don't be surprised, this might not happen." And I kind of looked at him dumbfounded, like, how can that possibly happen? We're all here, all the teams are here, they're warming up, TV is entrenched, we're going to be on our way. And that was at about noon. And then at 3:30, the carpet got pulled out from under us. find your route home because you're going home. And we were totally dismayed. The opportunity was gone, but on the plane we were talking about, well, we'll still have outdoor, and we can then get ready for the outdoor part of the season, and that's always our highest priority. And when we landed, one of our administrators happened to be there and said, "Have you heard the outdoor season is gone as well?" So it was a real tough afternoon to lose indoor as well as outdoor, and we felt we had a great outdoor team.
Yeah, just when you talk to really anyone, friends, family, colleagues, March feels like so long ago, right? I mean, it's like we're kind of in a time frame of like pre and post March of 2020, right? And so just to think we're almost a year from the last national championship that was contested in track and field and cross country is, I mean, in a normal year, you say, oh, it was just last year, but now you say a year ago, it feels so much longer.
Well, and once outdoor got taken away, then some of those athletes that we have that are capable of being at the Olympic trials, obviously we're going, well, geez, the Olympics are going to be on, the Olympic trials, we'll just start getting ready for that. And then, as time passes, all of a sudden, well, oh, by the way, we're not going to have the Olympics and we're not going to have the trials. So everything's moving to 2021. So there was a lot of scrambling by myself and probably many of my peers of trying to keep those that were capable of possibly having some type of a summer competition season. And then all of a sudden, it just seemed like every time we thought we had a positive, it turned out to be canceled or postponed. And then all of a sudden, summer flashed by and we're back in in school, and we're just thinking, okay, can we put it together? And thank God for the insight and the direction of our commissioner and our athletic directors in the SEC. They never had a doubt that we were going to have cross country. In fact, I spoke with my athletic director, Hunter Yurachek, and said, now what happens if football gets canceled? He said, that doesn't stop you from having cross country season if you can run it safely and the kids are wanting to participate. So we built a schedule, and between the 3 Power 5 schools that were still going to have a high standard of testing and have cross country competitions, we thought we could interchange a lot there. And then that kind of, as they call it, a fluid situation where different conferences had different standards of testing. And so the end result is we're pretty much in a SEC only cross country schedule. And obviously our summit this fall will be the SEC championships, the very end of October. And then there's always the possibility that as of late, we might have cross country in the winter as well.
So can you describe what cross country in the fall of 2020 looks like, as, and especially as you're describing, other conferences are canceling, the SEC and your administration in Arkansas saying, no, hey, we're going to have cross country, where all these other pieces are falling away alongside that, right?
Exactly.
What does this even look like? If you had to describe it as a coach to, a fan out there.
I think one thing that is paramount is the athletes themselves are super excited to have some degree of a return to normalcy, if you want to call it that. Even though we might be only within ourselves of the SEC, and there's still a chance Big 12 might have a couple of teams that are competitions, but it's a very limited schedule. It has a lot of protections from the virus in respect of how we race, how far the starting boxes are apart. There is no finish shoot. It opens up. So a lot of the characteristics of what traditional cross country looks like from the junior high to the international level is now scrambled in a much more different format, so to speak. But we've had one competition thus far. We got a chance to go to LSU and run on our conference course 2 weeks ago, and they did a great job of hosting. And and the kids were absolutely elated. So once the gun goes off, they return to that excitement of competition. Training, you can only do so much so long, and you can only run with each other and be challenged by certain people on your team. But then when the jersey colors change, it escalates to another standard.
Coach, you alluded to the athletes needing a sense of normalcy. And I think that's a really valiant and tangible reason to compete this fall. But could you, if we zoomed back a little bit from an administration and maybe like an AD and kind of coaching perspective, because half of the schools canceled cross, and it seems like we're having a championship in the spring, what is the benefit of having fall cross country? Is there some sort of league memorandum or, some sort of minimum qualification standard that schools need to hit and that justifies even running fall cross country at this point?
I think to some degree, our athletic administration, even up at the highest level of the commissioner of the SEC, wants to get a positive flow about fall sports returning to somewhat of normalcy. And obviously, we're all supporting football because, they're the golden goose that finances everything. So I think we were not necessarily an experiment, but definitely the leaders in getting this process going. And our kids and our coaching staff, we're all super excited about, man, if we could just have some type of a definition of a season. So we're fortunate that we have that. And I feel real sorry for those conferences and those individuals that, it wasn't their decision. It was made way pay grades higher than theirs, where they got stymied. And they're trying to be creative. I see BYU did a basketball mile, dribbling for a mile. I've been contacted by some of the other teams. Hey, let's run a 3,000 on the track and we'll compare times, or a 5,000, or we can do a relay, so on and so forth, just to be creative and keep that stimulus to their respective athletes that, hey, we're still competitors and we're still trying to get some type of routine going again. And then we'll go from there. Now, a fall cross country season this year is pretty much a conference highlight. And the good news is the work that we are attaining in competitions in the fall will apply towards consideration of being included in the March 15th championship for the national title. So what gives a little more incentive to our crew, hey, let's have a bang up season as best we possibly can, beat those that we can race against, and that's going to be in consideration for selection in the winter.
Coach, I'm curious, you talked about how most of the season is SEC only, but it sounds like some of the Power 5 schools and conference members are trying to, at this point it's three of you, right? ACC, Big 12, and SEC are trying to have some competition between them. Can you describe what that has been like in your experience so far this season, and has it happened?
Well, it hasn't happened yet in our area. We were going this weekend to preview the Missouri course at Gans Creek, which will host our SEC championships next year. And we were super excited about a couple of Big 12 teams were going to join us. And then there's people way again ahead of our pay grade that make decisions, and it's the medical faction, that there's not agreement between the conferences about what is acceptable testing. And so my understanding is the Big 12 and the SEC, as of today, have worked out their differences. We haven't had an opportunity to meet anybody in the ACC, though. So I think maybe a couple of weeks from now, we're going to have a competition at Texas A&M And I think we might have an opportunity to face some other conference foes in possibly the Big 12 or maybe some other conferences. But again, everything is dictated a lot of times by the testing protocols that each conference has adopted. And in ours, we have the PCR test, and we do the double nostril. So it's supposed to be 99, 98% accurate. And I know we're spending a lot of money as a university to make sure all our athletes are being tested aggressively and try to make sure we're as safe from COVID as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point for people to hear and understand, because it's, on the surface, you're like, oh, the Big 12's running, SEC's running, ACC's running, they're going to have meets together. Great. But each conference could have very strict guidelines and, in-depth
Exactly.
protocol around testing. But if those don't match up, that actually is not allowing teams to compete, even though they're both testing and have safety protocols.
Yes. For some reason, there was supposed to be an agreement amongst those 3 Power 5 conference schools. And then for some reason, it got lost in the wash somehow. And so we end up calling up and, again, we were going to race this weekend at Gans Creek, and we were super excited about Iowa State and Kansas coming. And then lo and behold, their protocol is different than ours. And somebody had to change the protocols. And then whenever you're involved with testing, you got to have, different time frames and the degree of accuracy and so on and so forth. So the end result is this weekend, again, we're going to see only SEC teams.
Does one last question I have for you about this fall, Coach, is, the fact that this is mainly an SEC based season. You'll have a conference meet, but outside of that, there isn't a lot. Does that affect the importance of the season? Are the runners, your runners, discouraged in any way, saying, hey, or there's less meaning here, or how are you looking at that and trying to approach that kind of mentally?
And it didn't happen. I thought, some kids would even have the option of opting out. But again, I think our athletes are so hungry to get back into a routine that they've lived by for so many years, be a junior high or prep, high school, and then off to college, that, they're just super excited about the opportunity to travel and get the opportunity to compete against other teams that, if they happen to be in the SEC, so be it. If we see somebody else come along, hey, that's great. The more the merrier. And we've been very fortunate that across the board, from freshman to 5th year senior, they're super excited. And then also they're quite aware that this season does not count against their eligibility. So, it's a free year, so to speak.
A lot of trial and
Coach,
error.
I'd love to.
Good.
I'd love to piggyback on talking about the eligibility question and things a little bit more. And I'm curious, when that decision came down that articulated that we would have NCAA championships in March, can you maybe lay the foundation and let the fans kind of understand what has been articulated to coaches from the perspective of, here's who can declare for NCAAs for both cross and indoor, which are on the same weekend. Here's who can declare. Here's how it will affect your eligibility. Because I think it feels a little gray right now because you just mentioned, this season isn't counting against your eligibility, but then will winter cross count? And then can you declare for both indoor and outdoor? Like, what was the original message to a coach, and how can you kind of clarify that for a fan?
Originally, and it has changed hourly. It's amazing how things have changed. originally, I think all of us were under the assumption there would be no national championship. And so we would have conference or interconference competitions, with the summit competition season finale would be the respective conference meet. And then a group of coaches that really love cross country a lot said, what about the possibility? And they got the momentum going that, hey, we could actually move this. And maybe it was copying the state of California high school cross country season, where we can start in January and have a finale in sometime in March. And then, it just went through trial and error, and then it became a proposal, which a lot of people thought would never fly, because it was at the detriment of possibly indoor. And then the track and field committee for the NCAA said, no, we're going to give you an option of you can do one or the other, or possibly both, and you can do it individual by individual. So it does have a tendency to possibly slander a little bit of the indoor championship, or possibly the cross country championship, because obviously people are going to have to make hard decisions individual by individual about what is best for the respective individual as well as their team situation. So yeah, it just was constantly evolving, but I think the vast majority of my peers are going to go, hey, we're going to declare them both, keep everything alive, and then as things evolve, a vaccine all of a sudden comes to our world in December, January, February. Will that change things? It's yet to be determined. So I think a lot of us have become proactive. There's been question about, can we have an indoor season? The SEC coaches have worked diligently about having a plan A and a plan B if all of a sudden the NCAA, decides to change their ways and cancel another sport. So maybe what they could do is, since we have this tradition of belating things, we could have an indoor national championship the week before the outdoor national championship, and then really confuse everybody that's in our fan base. But the idea is, one thing we've got to, as a coaching body, is realize we got to do, number one, what's best for the athlete. And that's, short term as well as long term. And the idea of don't take away opportunities for these young people, because in their timeline of their life, this is a very small window that they get to celebrate an opportunity to compete at one of the highest levels in the world. And, we want to make sure as coaches, we stay united to give those kids that opportunity. And I think when we start fragmenting cross-country specialists versus sprint specialists and so on and so forth in those respective universities, it takes away from the respect of maybe some of our administrators of, do you guys have your act together at all?
Well, Coach, I'd love to, scratch a little bit on, you mentioned there was a proposal, it went through trial and error, there were evolutions, and we talk about giving the kids opportunities. How could the best opportunity and the best situation be, respectfully, to put the championships on the same weekend? How did we land on that being the best option?
Again, I don't know who made that decision and said, oh my gosh, March 15th is available. The only thing I think logistically might be an explanation, if you have really good distance runners and you decide they're qualified for the indoor nationals, and as a coach, you have a couple of them, represented at Fayetteville hosting the national indoor championships, and then we can just drive an hour and a half, or hour and 45 minutes over to Stillwater, and then we can meet the cross country team over there. maybe the proximity aspect became part of the solution. I don't know. Why didn't we have it March 1st or whatever? I just know if I'm living in the far north of the U.S., there was a reason why they invented indoor track, was because it's too darn cold to be outside running over hill and dale, especially peeling down, to a t-shirt and your underwear and, racing around the ice and snow that's available to you.
So Coach, just to be clear, there hasn't really been an explanation as to why that decision was made, or any transparency around why they felt that was a good option.
I think there's so many chains of command that make these types of decisions that I don't know if I could put my finger on which one all of a sudden pulled out of their hat. Hey, nothing's going on March 15th. That's a Monday. Let's try that.
I mean, do you feel like is that something that coaches need? I mean, is that when you're making plans with your athletes, your student athletes, I mean, does that clarity help in how you're communicating this, ever-changing plan that is, 2020, 2021? I mean, is that something that coaches are saying, hey, this would really be helpful to understand?
Well, I think we try to be as transparent as possible. So whatever information we do get, we share with the kids, because they hear it a lot of times before we do. And they'll come in and go, hey, did you know this said this? Or my mom called me and said that this is going to happen. We'll try to make sure we get accurate information. And as I tell them, this world of track and field is just filled with rumors. I'm going to try to give you what is really concrete. And I know you guys do a great job of spreading that word that, hey, you might hear this and that, but this is the truth. And so we do know now that March 12th and 13th, we'll have an indoor championship in Fayetteville as scheduled. And we have the opportunity March 15th to go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, and run on their brand new course that they're super excited about.
We appreciate the compliment, Coach. We're all about scratching and digging for a little bit of truth here and sharing that. But so I'd like to follow up and you mentioned, you haven't been given a clear explanation on why they chose cross country championships for the same weekend of indoor track. Like, you haven't been given a clear explanation. You are the coach at the University of Arkansas, right? You are the Triple Crown winners. Like, if you don't have an explanation, like, who gets one?
Great question. I just think that, there's a directive that's sent out from the NCAA. This is it. And, if you'd like to come, you need to do some racing with your team, build a resume of why you should be included. And my understanding is the selection process, because there is no regional, will be by a committee, which I'm sure glad I'm not on, because talk about trying to compare apples with oranges and bananas. You're going to have people that have great teams, but because of the limitations financially, limitations travel-wise, the whole scenario with testing and so on, it's going to make it very difficult for teams to get out of their region and crisscross the United States and make some comparisons of who should be selected and who shouldn't be. So, there's 300 schools or over 300 that try cross country, and you're going to pick 32 of them. That'll be a very difficult task.
Coach, one more, question on just this decision. A lot of times I know when these proposals come up that are sometimes pushed through and sometimes not, a lot of times there's a kind of another proposal, an A and a B, let's say, of sides. Was there any other proposal that was put out there? And if not, in your mind, is there a more, a better situation on when this championship could fall?
Well, there is.
When I say this championship, I mean XC.
Yeah. No, cross country, there is a possibility of just as of late that we could possibly host a national championship in 2020. It would have to be maybe the second week of December. So everybody would have a belated cross country opportunity. And then, again, the selection process would be the similar one as they're going to do in the winter, but we could still run in the late fall, the traditional time of cross country, and then have our national championship, wrap that up, and then spend all our energies and focus on getting ready for an indoor season. That is still in its kind of grassroots development. Will it gain momentum and then get to the right people? It's going to have to start moving quickly if it's going to be in consideration.
And to be clear, this would then replace the March championship, and there would only
Correct.
be a December championship.
Yes, we would finish in 2020, kind of the traditional calendar, except belated a little bit into the December months, and then obviously we would, focus in January off to trying to get an indoor season put together.
So just to touch on timeline here, we're talking about now changing the decision, getting the schools that aren't currently competing in cross country to now start competing, and this is all within the next 8 to 10 weeks.
Yes, and that it obviously creates difficulty, but they were able to do it in a short time frame with this proposal that has us now going into March. So are they open to maybe an amendment to the plan and finish up in 2020? And then my thought would be, instead of going to Oklahoma State, let's go to Florida State, where we're going to go next year anyway, and just flip-flop the two hosts. So we do have a warm weather, not necessarily warm weather, but a much warmer environment, and that's a possibility too. But again, those things are all conjecture, and like you said, in the matter of 8 to 10 weeks, putting together financial plans and travel plans and testing issues and so on and so forth, because right now a lot of conferences have just thrown up their hands and said, forget it. And we're going to play football as best we can. And you guys can trudge through the cold in January, February, and March.
Coach, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned some conferences said, let's just forget it, right? And that's kind of where we were, let's say a month ago, where dominoes started to fall, right? Each conference started to say, we're out on cross country, we're out on football, da-da-da-da-da. But now, this month, we've slowly started to see the pivot, right? So now all of a sudden, Big Ten's going to have football, and Pac-12, the West, the WAC. And it's just interesting that it's starting to pivot the other way. And so I guess I'm curious, from your perspective, what's I guess the tipping point that would push cross country back to this kind of proposed idea? What's the tipping point that maybe gets a conference or a coach on board for this now December 2020 proposal?
And that is what it has to happen. You got to have probably conference commissioners buy into it from their respective coaches. And then, they carry a lot of clout, and they can speak to the various committees, if they're not already on some of those, that make those types of decisions, and off you go. It's possible. It might be a long shot as time continues to pass by, but it is a possibility. Otherwise, we're destined to the decisions that have been made, and we'll make the best of it. And I hope that the kids have a great experience, be it indoor or be it cross country.
Well, it sounds like for now, schools need to tentatively prepare for December just in case,
Yes.
and
Well,
then have them.
yeah,
You're
I mean,
right.
that's a possibility. Again, this is in the grassroots level, and I think that um, maybe in the next week or so, 2 weeks, we could see if there's going to be any progress. And if
Yeah.
there's not, then you batten down the hatches and start getting your 2021 calendar out and start scripting the next scenario.
Well, I'd like to dig into the 2021 scenario in March, and I feel like even if the championships are adjusted to December, a lot of these same questions may still be actually relevant. But first off, I guess the big question is, how do you qualify for the NCAA championships?
Yeah, and that's my understanding. That hasn't been clearly defined. All I heard was that is going to be by a committee. And, hopefully these are people that can weigh um, teams' abilities. And I'm not sure how you do that in a non-subjective manner, um, and try to be as objective as possible because somebody might have had a great fall, and then come spring, two of the top five are out or totally focused on indoor and are not going to join that crew, so on and so forth. So um, again, I think myself and my peers are going to keep all their options open as best they possibly can, as long as they possibly can. And then when they have to make a hard decision, um, that is yet to be determined.
And so it sounds like that situation is still very fluid. We've put the marker for the championship, but not exactly how to get there, what that will be, what that will mean, and from what you're saying, is there any understanding of who will be on that committee or what that committee will be made up of?
No, no, that all seems to be, I think there's a lot of things to be determined. And, I think we're just all going to sit, and then something will obviously come from the NCAA's office. And Jeff Malinsky is our liaison to the NCAA, and he sits in on those. And fortunately for us, Jeff is very knowledgeable in our sport and came from USA Track and Field, so he has a fantastic background. And I think he would do, if he has input, he's going to do what's best to make sure that our athletes are protected and our coaches are informed.
Coach, I want to dive into a little bit of the process of quality of competition, right? Trying to be subjective, and I might make a parallel to football here, right? So every year when we look at the college football playoffs, right, and we talk about scheduling, one of the main challenges is those first couple games of the season, right? Are you going to play a
Yep.
quote unquote cupcake team? Or are you going to go cross
Right.
conference and maybe get a quality win? Or if you lose that game, at least it's against a ranked opponent, right? So now you're almost forced to be in this subjective manner. And so how do you approach, getting a quality kind of resume of work? Because you're even talking about this weekend, you almost raced against some Big 12 schools, and that could go either for or against you, right? Because if you're
Yes.
only racing in conference and you crush everybody in conference, who's to say that you aren't, the best team or one of the best teams to bring to the national championship? However, you also run the risk of getting beat on a weekend. So how do you balance that kind of a quality of resume dance that you guys are doing right now?
Well, and it's truly become a dance, because also in that piece of trying to figure out how to put a schedule together, you also have finances and travel restrictions, because like in the SEC schools, we don't travel on commercial air. We're chartered only, and again, the safety factor is paramount. So yeah, there's going to be an incredible number of limitations on who can go intersectionally, unless there's a migration from the north and the northeast to come south to get in a quality competition in good weather. And, you know, for example, the Florida State facility is phenomenal. Is Bob Brayman going to become a full-time meet director in the months of January, besides his track and field coaching responsibilities? That's yet to be determined. And are we going to end up hosting a competition? Then the ultimate decision maker is the testing procedures. They seem to dictate who gets in and who doesn't. And that's going to be also and again, I think we all get back to the idea of vaccine or an antibody therapy can't come soon enough, because I think it'll solve a lot of these issues that we're discussing today. That, you know, if the phase 3 testing continues in a positive manner and we can get these by late 2020 or early 2021 and get some calming effect across the United States where people feel more secure travel-wise and so on. But ultimately, what is going to happen financially? You know, obviously the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the Pac-12 have changed their direction to make sure that they don't go financially too deep in the hole. You know, we're all going to end up batten down the hatches, I think, because, you know, the limitations financially that are occurring across the board. And then, you know, we got to make sure March Madness comes off, because, you know, cross country and track and field are not known as revenue sports. So, you know, we've got to be careful about how we travel, how we spend monies, and what our budgets are going to be like, and so on. So the consciousness of our coaching body has got to be very knowledgeable in making sure we make accurate and effective decisions.
Looks like Al's a little muted here, so
Sorry about that.
We'll get him on.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So obviously there's the testing challenges, the financial challenges, the travel challenges. And because of all those challenges, are the minimum amount of meets still viable? Like, has that guideline been put forth saying, like, to be eligible for NCAA Cross Country Championships, you have to compete in X amount of events? Has that been laid out?
Yeah, my understanding is you have to be in 2 competitions and you cannot pass 7 competitions, because the traditional season for cross country is a maximum of 7 competitions. So somewhere in the middle, you know, you might go to one extreme or the other, but each coach is going to have to make that decision. We're going to use 4 of our credits, so to speak, to a total season in the fall. And then we might have to, if need be, pick up another competition or 2 in winter, if that is something that is required to continue to make us a possible selection for cross country.
Yeah, that actually, I was just thinking that, you know, if you guys will have a good chunk of your events already in the fall, you know, it sounds like it's not quite known what that means for winter competition. You know, and as a point of clarity, you know, you're in a situation where there's essentially 2 cross country seasons, right? There's a fall for you, and then a winter for everybody.
Right.
Will there be 2 SEC cross country championships?
No. My understanding is the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC will have fall conference championships. And then this addendum going into 2021 will be a potential possibility of another competition or two, and then springboard that to the National Cross Country Championship. Meanwhile, the indoor championship season is evolving.
Yeah, and so the scenario in my mind that I'm thinking about is, we'll take Arkansas for an example. Say you have a season with 4 events in the fall, so you get a majority of your required competitions out of the way. Let's say hypothetically, Arkansas wins a cross country title for the SEC, and then you decide, hey, conditions in the winter, just, it's too cold. It's, the meets availability and where we have to travel isn't really there. We're going to focus on, the track and train and get our competitions and prep. Are you, are you in a situation where you're at risk? And I ask this almost knowing you don't really know the answer yet, where you're at risk of having not competed in a timely, manner comparative to when the championships will actually take place on one side, but then on the other side, would they not have a Power 5 conference champ at the meet if they didn't compete between December and the championship date?
It's again, I think we get back to that term. It's a fluid situation, and there's a lot of questions that we all have that we have no answers for. So right now, I think our focus is at Arkansas. Hey, we're going to make the best of this fall season, and obviously our summit will be the SEC championships. And then traditionally, we are always competitive indoors, and so we will, address indoors as our priority, with the option that cross country could still be a possibility, depending on what each individual athlete wants to do and what's going to be best for them in their career, and see how they feel about it, and do they want to put on long sleeve shirts and tights and hats, and let's get out there and keep that cross country season alive.
Coach, it's interesting you mentioned having those 4 cross country races this fall, but then still having those credits this spring. I want to flip the kind of perspective in this scenario. And obviously this isn't not necessarily your responsibility to figure this out for other schools, but I want to play devil's advocate and present like a smaller school that's not in a Power 5, right? Who is maybe typically been on the cusp of hopefully making it into an NCAA championship, right? And now you put travel restrictions in place, you put financial restrictions in place. It was already difficult for kind of those mid-major schools to make it into an NCAA championship. Now they have to somehow prove that within 2 meets, right? And like, I think of my old, where I went to school, South Dakota State, like SDSU winning the Summit League Conference title, I don't think is going to probably be enough clout to get them into NCAAs. So like a school, for instance, like a Southern Utah or even like a Portland, like how do those schools navigate this kind of like super tight window that they have to prove themselves?
Again, almost impossible task, but I think the creativity by those respective coaches. I mean, as a former coach at Cal Poly SLO, I'd be scrambling with anybody that's in that Pac-12 to try to interact with them as much as possible. Obviously it's going to require creativity and travel and budget, but those things are capable of being solved. But you're going to have to, at South Dakota State, you're going to have to probably either go on long drives or, get on a commercial flight and, take your shot and make sure your kids are ready to be able to get some victories over what are presumed, traditional powerhouse teams.
Coach, you guys are known for your indoor track. You're obviously hosting NCAA indoors this coming year. You made a comment about Coach Bob Brayman putting on his meet director hat during the season. Is there a scenario where you guys are hosting a track meet in Fayetteville. You guys are also known to have a pretty stellar cross country course, where you say, hey, the 5K for this indoor meet, we're actually going to run as a cross country meet. So could it serve two purposes, where it's a scored cross country meet, but also you can score the top 8 for the track meet as well if needed?
Yep. No, those types of thoughts have definitely are distinct possibilities where, hey, they're bringing their team anyway. Hey, line up your distance crew on Friday, and we'll knock out a cross country race, and then come back Saturday evening. And if you want to run, a track race, that's up to you. But I think a lot of us as coaches that have, nice facilities and facilities that are always available, are going to have to be very creative, no doubt about it. Coming from California, I mean, I know that it's very difficult for any California school to have access to a cross country course at their flexibility and their personal opportunity to host. That's a very limited opportunity in the entire state of California. A lot of people are going to have to become collaborative and try to figure out ways of having competitions at mutual sites where multiple programs can get to comfortably. And I'm glad that I'm at Arkansas, so those things in our backyard.
Coach, I think a lot of us got excited when you mentioned the weekend of indoors, like, let's line up and run a cross country race. I think having the championships on the same weekend, I'd love to hear like any scenarios you've heard of that have been thrown out there to kind of accommodate this extreme circumstance, whether it be like maybe nixing a 5K out of indoor track, or like, can we allow our cross, what's the maximum amount of time that we can give the DMR milers a chance to run cross, like, I guess, like, what are the scenarios that have been thrown out because you are hosting that maybe have been considered, or you would consider or like to consider, that might alleviate some of the tension between these two events?
Right. I think you don't take away from the tradition of one competition, i.e. the Indoor National Championship, because you happen to throw together a last-minute cross-country championship 2 days later. I think you're not going to have the quality that you would traditionally have at one or the other. Something's got to give. And do I see people running the National 5,000 meter championship on Friday night and then Saturday morning driving to Oklahoma State to preview the course and rest on Tuesday or on Sunday and then race on Monday? I'm sure that's possible, but I know I'm just not sure if that's the right decision. Personally, I'm sure many of my peers are a lot smarter than me and would figure out a way to make that happen. But maybe looking at it as a prelim and a final. But I think it's a situation where you'd really have to sit down and really figure out what is best ultimately for the distance runners, because they're the ones with multiple choices. And think about this, a lot of qualifying for the outdoor national championships, as far as qualifying marks for the regionals, takes place traditionally at Stanford University 2 weeks later. And so there's another wild card in the decision-making process. So I think there's a lot of hard decisions that need to be made by respective coaches and those athletes that are capable of qualifying for indoors. Because remember, we only take 16 deep. So that's a very elite field. And then those that would traditionally run at cross country with the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 runners want to run cross country. And then maybe their leader runs indoors. I know there's a whole bunch of scenarios that people are going to have to figure out. And then also, how does that affect the selection process.
You referenced the outdoor track season that butts up right against all this this fun. Are there any concerns about this current structure that you see having effects on the outdoor season that maybe aren't being discussed?
Well, I think that there's decisions yet to be made about doing one or both of indoor and cross country, and then try to bring that athlete back to an outdoor season and a championship clear into June. And then if you're elite enough to be thought of as a potential indoor qualifier in the 3 or the 5, or possibly another event, and then springboard that 2 days later into a cross country championship, and then try to come back into an outdoor season and go through the qualifying procedure to make it to the national meet and have aspirations of running in the Olympic trials, I think there's got to be some people out there that are a lot smarter than me that are going to try to pull that off, because I see a lot of roadblocks in that decision process.
And when you say roadblocks, what do you mean by that?
I think just physiologically, psychologically, that's almost an impossibility to try to be good at all 3 seasons in a very short period of time, and possibly throw in the Olympic trials experience as well, or aspirations of possibly making a team. There's a lot of people that train for years and have one focus on an outdoor championship, and they don't even think about indoors or cross country. And now the NCAA is trying to pull off basically all 3 between the month of March. I mean, if you're looking at summit competitions, March and June. Pretty short window.
Coach, I'd love to, you talk about physiological barriers and psychological barriers, and you as a coach are tasked with helping athletes navigate, their own boundaries and their own comfort levels. I'd love to know, week of that week of indoor / cross country championships, you have an athlete that has the opportunity to compete in both. You sit down with them on the couch in your office. What is that conversation like? How are you testing their instincts and their abilities? And because some of them might have a long-term goal for an Olympic year, what are the factors that are being articulated in that office visit?
Well, some of those that come in and sit down, they're going to find clearly that 51% of the vote is mine. There's others that might have 51% of the vote, and they won't have the opportunity of one or the other. They're going to have that choice is already made for them. For example, Taylor Werner has no cross-country season left. Katie Izzo has no cross-country left. Karina Villon has no cross-country left. So they're getting ready for potentially an indoor season, and some of them only the outdoor season, and then obviously springboard that to post-collegiate competition if they so qualify and are desiring to do such. So we've already sat down with those that are going to potentially have a decision that they get 51% of the vote. The ones that don't get the 51% of the vote, we're going to leave all our opportunities open and then sit down and discuss the pros and cons of what we're trying to do, and ultimately what we're trying to do outdoors. Our philosophy at Arkansas is cross country serves a purpose for indoor, indoor serves a purpose for outdoor, and outdoor is where you make professional contracts and Olympic teams and so on and so forth. So it's always weighted to the outdoor season.
As you know, a follow up to that, you know, there's a lot of discussions, there's a lot of decisions, even leading to that point where it's the week of the championship. And I know you said the student athletes are excited for some normalcy and for some competition. You know, but I'm curious to know what they're talking about, because even within, you know, we had a meet last week and it was great to get back out there. There's all of these things now still floating around. Championship was just announced. Wow, the championship might get changed. What does this mean? You know, is indoor actually going to happen? People are saying it's unsafe to be inside without open air. You know, so there's all of these things still floating around. What are the biggest questions and concerns on a day-to-day basis right now that you're noticing from student athletes at Arkansas, whether within track or just in the athletic department as a whole?
As far as the distance crew, they're just focused on the idea of continuing to develop through the cross country season. Obviously, that'll be a springboard to the indoor season. And until somebody much higher up than any of us that makes that decision about indoor, we're going to just plan on staying on schedule and pursuing the opportunities that are going to be available to us. And then, you know, ultimately, I certainly think that to protect our economy and look at the big picture, there's a lot of smart people out there devising, and a lot of money, devising a cure for this thing. And I think the quicker that comes along, it'll answer a lot of the questions that we're waiting on and solve a lot of the crises that we're potentially going to go through.
Coach, I think a lot of people are skeptical about indoors. Some people are super optimistic. What is the indicator? You just mentioned vaccine, but I guess what is the metric or kind of the green light that you are waiting for or keeping an eye on that will indicate indoors a go?
I think the indoors as a go in its most stripped form would be no fans, limited officiating, probably dictated by the size of the building, the structure that you're competing in. Your state health board will dictate how many people is capacity. Will that then demand a women's section in the morning and a men's section in the afternoon, or vice versa? You know, limited number of events on a particular weekend to limit the total time inside the structure. I think those questions are yet to be answered, but I think we all that have indoor facilities are going through the process of trying to figure out those questions that yet are to be answered. And you know, we're going to try to make sure that we can pull off an indoor season. At the same time, we got to make sure it's safe as possible. And again, the wild card for this whole thing is a cure, either a vaccine or the antigen therapies. And, you know, that would probably solidify a lot of the solutions.
From your perspective, you know, the distance runners, especially in some of the, you know, the 3 Power 5 conferences that are in play right now, you know, have somewhat of an advantage of having competition and getting back out there. For track and field athletes, specifically non-distance runners and field event athletes, what is there a negative effect to the potential that, you know, indoor gets canceled and they have not had a competition in a year? You know, from your lens as a coach, are they now, and again, thinking kind of, hey, it's an Olympic year and trials and all these things are coming up, are they a year behind now?
It has to take a negative effect, and there's no doubt it'd be a tragedy if we are not able to pull off an indoor season. Maybe not the traditional super excitement and great fans and lots of quality efforts because of this, continued COVID scare. We just need to, again, keep our fingers crossed and endorsing any scientists we come across, like, hey, keep it going, work on Sundays, don't take any days off. Let's get the cure taken care of. Because again, they already missed out on the national championship last year. And yes, that's true. We were able to get in a lot of the season, but there were people that were redshirted. There were people that were injured. There were people that, were not given the opportunity to have an indoor season and utilize that as a springboard to outdoors. And then outdoors got taken away as well. If we just keep backing up and backing up and backing up, when do you finally start? Do you wait till, there's a magical cure for everybody? That might take eons to solidify. What does somebody say that, the common cold is a virus, and we've worked hard and diligently for centuries to try to figure out a cure for it. We still don't have a cure for it. The flu vaccine has a 40 to 60% chance of success. So is there a metric about when it is safe to have indoor competitions with fans and so on and so forth? I think that's all yet to be determined, and a lot of it is going to be determined by the receptivity of the American public to a vaccine. And when that occurs, does herding immunity then become involved, and so on and so forth? I just know that if we have to not have fans, how will that affect our sport? Will we have to limit the number of officials? So on and so forth. And a lot of that's going to be dictated by our local state health board. So again, it just adds more questions to the decision process. And so in the middle of the night, when I'm looking up at the ceiling going, how am I going to fix this? I have not found a solution yet. But I have not gotten
Coach, it's interesting. Well, Coach, you were mentioning, we're talking about the lack of competitions, and, obviously that helps to kind of, iron sharpens iron, right? And gets you sharp. And I think this perspective could be taken on two different spectrums, right? So like distance runners, you can make the argument that, hey, like they're less over raced, right? The advantage is like if they don't have to race as much, they can build a bigger base and they can be fresher. And it's not a war of attrition of who's not injured for the championship. However,
Yes.
As a fan, I'm looking at the Olympics in, next summer. I honestly, as a fan, like I worry about our triple jumpers being sharp, right? And like, hey, like, are we really going to be the medal favorites, or are we going to be at the top of that podium, that graphic that has the USA winning the most medals? Part of me is worried about our overall quality being affected because our athletes have not been able to compete.
It's definitely going to be a limiting factor. There's no doubt about it. Yet, some of our traditional great meets in Europe were able to put together focused competitions that might be one event in a 10 event meet in a 2-hour window for TV. We might as college coaches have to be creative and do something similar to be able to ultimately prepare our potential future U.S. team, Olympic team. The other scenario that is yet to be discussed: where are our post-collegians going to race in preparation for the World Indoor Championships? What opportunities are they going to have? Because again, the restrictions that are occurring across the United States at indoor facilities are pretty limiting. And, we might have a pretty skeleton crew that can compete at the World Indoor Championships, let alone the Olympic Games. So it is detrimental. And I think if there is a positive spun out of a negative, it's not only here in the U.S., it's across the world. We're all in the same boat.
A lot of things still to be answered and to sift through. And there's one thing that I would like to maybe have you answer for us before we let you go, Coach. You have 3 titles to defend in a span of 4 months now. We'll assume all these championships happens. What are the goals of the University of Arkansas this year as you look to between that March and June timeframe?
We are super excited. I have 2 phenomenal assistant coaches in Chris Johnson and Brian Compton. They have year in, year out brought a total track team, and then I merged the distance crew into that to make it kind of a 3-headed monster. We feel that maybe the greatest team we've ever had outdoors could be this year's 2021 outdoor team. And a lot of the backbone of that is going to be able to compete indoors as well. And so we're very much looking forward to the indoor and outdoor opportunities. And as far as cross country goes, I think most teams that lose 5 seniors would drop off the map. But I think in our situation, we have a lot of depth, and we have been joined by multitude of transfers that have experience, let alone some of the people that we've been developing in our program. And I think the combination of that crew is really starting to show its strength during this abbreviated cross-country fall season.
So it sounds like, it sounds like they're, I don't, would this be accurate? Maybe 2 defenses of titles and a third where you feel like there's a chance to be pretty competitive, or is it 3 defenses of titles?
I think in a situation, realistically, we always never point to win the title itself. You win to try to get on the podium, because it takes a lot of luck on that given weekend to win. But I think we have podium potential indoors and outdoors. And then cross country, I think that we have a very good crew that, what's exciting is they all return next year as well. So we're super excited about the end of 2020 and definitely 2021.
Awesome. Well, yeah, currently in the Flow Track rankings, I know you guys are sitting 11, so not too bad for losing 5 seniors off a championship team. So
it's really
we'll
nice.
Be excited to follow.
So we're all here on track.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. I'm sure it's a fun time to actually have some competitions on the calendar this fall, and obviously a challenging time and still understanding what the future holds. So we appreciate the insight and the discussion.
I'll do this weekly. This was fun.
Great.
Sounds good.
Well, we'll call you next week. We'll be chatting soon.
Anytime.
Well, great. Well, good luck to the Lady Razorbacks, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Take good care of yourselves. And thanks for your Flow Track. Keep it going.
Thanks, Coach.
You bet.
Alex, I think this conversation, it kind of goes just really well with all of 2020 conversations, right? When you think you might know something, you realize you don't really know anything. And just how many decisions are yet to be made, and how many of those decisions once made could change, right? And so it made me think of what we currently know and what we don't know. And the things that we know through our conversation is that we know Cross Country Championships is rescheduled for March 15th on a Monday in Stillwater, Oklahoma. We also know Indoor Champs is at its original date, just a few days before in Fayetteville. We know athletes can do both of those championships. We know athletes can compete in cross country and not lose a year of cross country eligibility if they still have eligibility. Cross country teams have to compete in 2 competitions at least, but no more than 7. And we also know there's a proposal to change the March 15th date of cross country to sometime in December. So those are the things that it feels like we know, right? And then on the other hand of things we don't know, why is cross country on the same weekend as indoor track championships? How do you qualify to the cross country championships? Who's on the committee to decide who qualifies? So many other things within that of how many teams and are there regions and whatnot, right? Part of that qualification. And then one other thing we don't know is if this is all going to change because of this new proposal.
Right.
So there's just a lot out there.
Right. Well, and my thing is for the things that we don't know, right? Okay, so like let's start working backwards from we decided to put a cross country championship on the same weekend as indoor track. Why? Like I want to hear the reason and the justification for that. Maybe there is a viable reason for it that we aren't hearing. Because I'm open to suggestions. DM Nick, throw it in my DMs. Like I want to know the reason and why we're justifying that, right? So let's work backwards from that, like why it seems to make sense in the first place. Because every indication we have so far is it doesn't. And why would we muddy the waters with this challenge to get schools to the same place on the same, to get athletes to compete on the same weekend? We had of all the gray and uncertainty we have over the last 6 months. One thing we did know for certain is that indoor was going to be on this weekend. And instead of, working from a solid cornerstone of something that we know, we decided to muddy it and we tossed a cross country championship on top of it. And again, maybe we're missing something. Please reach out and tell us what we are missing. But I think that is going to be a huge challenge. And why are we giving ourselves that challenge? There are so many other weekends to put the championship on. What is the reason of putting it there? Let's work backwards from that to something that is viable, and we can start pulling the wool back from some of these decisions. The other thing that kind of frustrates me about these decisions is that Coach Harter doesn't even know the justification for some of them, right? It's like, okay, if the coach at the defending champion, the University of Arkansas, the most decorated track and field program in NCAA history, doesn't know the justification for some of these decisions, who does? And that's frustrating.
Yeah. I think you brought up a good point when we were talking about some of the schools and trying to figure out how they navigate, creating a resume of a season and how they get to the cross country championships. I mean, there's always been probably you're on one side or the other if you like the current system or not. But, I think teams know the system. They plan their season around the system. And your ultimate goal is, how do I plan my season in the best way possible to get to the championships? And right now, all we know is a date. And there's not really an ability for teams to plan. And then add into the mix budget constraints, travel restrictions, the lack of ability to compete outside of your region, right? All of those things that ultimately go back, kind of point to what you were saying earlier, is how do you build that resume to say, I've actually had a strong season and I should be considered to have a shot at the NCAA championship meet.
Right. And again, you can also balance that with you only have to run 2, right? Maybe you see that as an advantage. You only have to run 2 meets. Well, who's to say I'm not a badass team? I have a perfect season. Look at this resume. I won all of our meets. All of our meets is 2, but it's a perfect season. You know what I mean? So again, we need that clarification. Rye, I can maybe hop on that decision committee. I don't know if they trust us. But again, we need a little verification there. But I think a couple other things, Lance did tease us with this proposal, right? Of the December date. I want to know what's holding us back from that, because, hey, we didn't think that Big Ten football was going to happen. Now it's happening. So how do we justify that we can do football, but we can't do cross country, right? I'd love to hear from a Big Ten coach. Do they feel like they're behind the 8 ball now because they haven't been, prepping for that? what are the hurdles that we need to get over to make this potential kind of quote unquote grassroots effort, which is no longer grassroots because it's on our pod, to have NCAAs in December. So what are the hurdles that are in front of us that we need to get over to make that happen? If it is the best situation for us, let's have those conversations. And I think those sort of conversations, and also the tinkering with like the indoor format, like, hey, let's have a time trial. Like, let's have our 5Kers run. Maybe we should just have cross country in Fayetteville the same weekend. I don't know. I want to poke the fire a little bit on those conversations, and those only happen beneath the grandstands. So thanks for joining us this week, guys. We'll see you next.